Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ask Kati Anything. I'm your host, licensed marriage and family therapist, Kati Morton. I'm so glad that you're here. In today's episode, we are going to talk about AI chat agents and using those in between therapy sessions, whether we think that's good or bad, why trauma can be hard for us to move past, and what it really means to be willing versus just trying. Then I'm also going to talk about wanting friends while also being socially anxious and an introvert, and why our therapist telling us that she cares about us can sometimes be triggering. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. The first question says, "Hey Kati, I am currently seeing a therapist, cognitive behavioral therapy with a focus on trauma." Now we call that, if people are using acronyms, it's CBT-TF. So it's cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma focused, okay? Since the sessions can be emotionally intense, I started to use ChatGPT between appointments to help process my thoughts and manage difficult emotions. I had previously tried journaling, but it felt more like a monologue and it wasn't as helpful. Using ChatGPT, however, has allowed me to engage in a dialogue, which has been more effective in organizing my thoughts and gaining clarity. When I shared this with my therapist, she expressed concern. She mentioned that using AI in this way might be similar to seeking support from another therapist, which could interfere with the therapeutic process. She also cautioned against the risk of isolation. What? My question for you, from a psychological perspective, what do you think about using AI as a supplemental tool between therapy sessions? Could it hinder the healing process? If so, what alternatives would you recommend to help navigate emotionally challenging periods between sessions? Now, everyone's going to have their own opinion. This is just my opinion. Your therapist obviously expressed her own opinion about this. I don't see anything wrong with it. I did a bunch of interviews with people from our community, as well as Sean and another member of our team, Daniel, and a lot of you use tools like this, which was honestly surprising to me. But I mean, I use ChatGPT to help me write better emails, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with it, especially because I think the thing that most of us seek in between therapy sessions isn't just our own voice, like you said, like a monologue, but a dialogue, like feedback. Like that's the thing I get most online is people wanting me to weigh in on what's going on in therapy or how their homework is going or why they're having a tough time with this. We need the feedback. And ChatGPT or other AI agents could be super cool. And I'd never thought of using it this way, but I like it. And I think if it helps you gain more insight and introspection and helps you move forward, I don't think there's anything wrong. I do understand what your therapist is saying about like, oh, it could, make you more isolated. I do want to also encourage you to have other relationships, like in-person regular relationships, and like start cultivating those or spending more time with the people you already have relationships and building on that so that we don't feel so alone or isolated. But especially when it comes to things that can be as sensitive as what we talked about in therapy, and maybe the relationships we have, we don't feel like are at that level to share that with, I don't have a problem with it. I honestly have always been of the mindset, and maybe it's because I'm online and because so many of you told me you use different tools and different apps and AI agents to assist you. I think that if something is helpful for us and it doesn't hurt anybody else, doesn't hurt us or anyone around us, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, I'm not a huge fan, for a random example, I'm not a huge fan of hypnotherapy, but if it's helpful for you, don't let my opinion about it get in the way of you getting the help that you need. I'm just one person. I'm not, an oracle. I'm not God. I just have my own personal opinion based on my own expertise, my own experience, right? And so this is being helpful for you. This is how you kind of process your therapy sessions. I think it's beautiful. I think it's wonderful. I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. Now, you asked, if there are other alternatives. I mean, I encourage my patients to journal, like you said, but it's a monologue to you. Totally get it. I also will encourage my patients to get workbooks or join workshops. I have some on my website. Those cost money. I know ChatGPT can too if you want to get up to a higher level of it. But either way, those are the other alternatives, as well as family and friends and people who feel safe, but you might not have those people. I know for a lot of us, we don't. I honestly am like amazed by just you creating this resource or your ingenuity in this way. And so I'm really impressed, and I think it's great, and I don't have any problem with it. And if you're feeling better and it allows you to process it, I say go for it. Okay. Moving on to question number 2, it says, "Hey, Katie, I've noticed a lot of talk about repressed trauma on the podcast. I, however, remember everything." That's also common too. It's almost like a split. I feel like it's like 30, 30, 30, like 30% or like 33.333 by doing full, thirds. 33% of people have no memory, 33.333% of people have full memory, and then 33% of us have like a mishmash, like kind of flipping like little bits and pieces of it. So, okay, anyways, I, however, remember everything. I'm currently working through some of this with an EMDR therapist. I'm having some difficulty letting go of these incidences, mainly because I feel like this invalidates them. Interesting. Also, I feel the need to keep them in my back pocket, so to speak, so as to justify my hurt whenever I need to. My question is, what does it look like to work through trauma while still recognizing that it was awful? As a separate note, why am I having an extreme physical reaction, shaking, almost convulsing, in the midst of EMDR therapy? Okay, a couple things to unpack here. Now, first, when we work through our trauma, a big piece of it is acknowledging how awful it is. And for a lot of us, that can be really difficult, even to admit that it was trauma, to use that word, the T word, or the A word if it's abuse, or, the R word if it was a sexual assault or rape. Words can be very loaded. And so through that process, we are admitting that what happened to us was terrible, was traumatizing, was overwhelming, all of that. The goal is to get us to a point where we've talked about it so much, or we've processed it through using other modalities, whether that's EMDR or something like that, so that when we talk about the trauma we sustained, it doesn't have any emotional charge. We don't feel the need to pull it out to validate our hurt, because frankly, that hurt isn't active anymore. Yes, we can recognize, oh, that was terrible. And for years, I felt shitty about that. But I'm okay to talk about it. It's not triggering to me. I'm not choking back tears or trying to, clench it because the anger or the rage I feel. We don't have that. And so that's really what it looks like to work through the trauma. Part of that is acknowledging how awful it is. Working through it doesn't mean minimizing or invalidating or saying, no, you can't have any pain. It's acknowledging it, talking about it, sitting with it, and moving through it, because the pain doesn't need to be all consuming, to be something that is in every moment of our day or every, interaction in our life. It doesn't need to be tainted by this trauma. We have to acknowledge what took place, what's happened to us, and how we want to move forward. And that, I know that might be kind of tricky to understand because we're not there yet, but that's okay. That's like part of the process, is us acknowledging, sitting with it, moving through, right? And so working through trauma does recognize that it's awful. That's like a huge piece of it. And a lot of times it's hard for us to admit that it was awful, but in your case, it's not. You're like, it was awful, but I need to feel validated. And my guess is that there's some part of your trauma that is really wrapped up in the fact, or not wrapped up in the fact, but almost like part of your trauma itself is the fact that people minimized, invalidated, or potentially just completely ignored the fact that you were being traumatized and that bad things were happening and it was hurtful for you. And so in this process of working it through, you're like, I don't want to let go of this. I just got a hold of this. I just was able to acknowledge. And that's okay. You don't have to let go of it right away. The process is in the letting go, but it's not a minimizing experience. It's more like, I don't need this to run my life anymore. And it's okay to not be there yet. Does that make sense? And then the separate note, you said the extreme physical reaction, like the shaking, almost convulsing in the midst of EMDR. What is happening, I believe, I'm hypothesizing here. Tell your therapist, they're seeing it or whatever, but talk with your EMDR therapist about this. This is why somatic experiencing, I really believe wholeheartedly, and I need to do some videos about it. I did a bunch of research about it years ago. I was working on a different project that didn't come to fruition, and I just kind of sat on all that research. But this shaking and convulsing is often our body's way of releasing the trauma. I know that can feel kind of woo-woo or sound kind of crazy, but we have cellular memory, and our body often holds on to like these stress responses, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn type of feeling. And in our body, mainly, it's like that fight, flight, freeze, because fawn is more of like an emotional reaction, right? And so it freezes and it holds on to that that energy, which is why we can feel so queued up when we have PTSD. Like everything makes us jumpy. We don't really trust people. We can be really explosive, really irritable. It's difficult for us to connect. All of that courses through our body. And then, we get into trauma therapy, we get into EMDR, we get into somatic experiencing. We feel ourselves kind of, without even realizing it, wanting to move or convulsing and shaking. And it's our body's way of releasing all of that energy. Now, if it feels like it's dangerous, if you feel like it's not something that's healthy or happy for you, again, talk to your therapist about it. But that's my assumption. That's my opinion on this, that it's your body's way of releasing all that built up trauma and stress that just like held us frozen and stuck so long, feeling so riled up internally. It's finally letting it out. It might be exhausting. I assume it's pretty exhausting. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's also like maybe a day or two later, kind of this release feeling. Okay. Sounds like things are difficult, but moving in the right direction. Moving on to question number 3, it says, hello. What does it really mean to be willing versus just trying? My therapist says I need to stop trying and start being willing, but I don't understand the difference. In my mind, wanting to get better, going to therapy, and putting in the effort is being willing. It sometimes feels like she's suggesting I'm not trying hard enough, which is frustrating. For context, I have complex PTSD from significant childhood emotional neglect and abuse, which has continued into adulthood. Thanksgiving was especially traumatic, and I'm working hard to heal while dealing with ongoing negativity from my family. When I express how their actions have hurt me, I'm dismissed as too sensitive, which makes it even harder to validate my own emotions. I hope this makes sense, and I'm sorry if it's a lot. Thank you so much for your time and the work that you do. It's not a lot. You're not too much. Totally makes sense. Now, I'm going to do my best to explain what I think your therapist is trying to get across. Trying in life, in therapy in particular, is like we're just going through the motions and we're trying to do the things they're telling us to do. We're doing our best, right? You told me to do this. I'm going to try. I'm going to give it my, I in my family, I don't know why my dad used to always say, give it a good Boy Scout try, or I'd say Girl Scout try. He always say, do your best, give it a try. So we give it a try. Trying means it may or may not work out, and we may or may not continue to try, right? Like I'm going to give it if it doesn't work, I don't know, maybe I won't try anymore. Maybe I didn't work. I tried, right? I tried and failed, or I tried and I succeeded. Now, willing, I don't know why your therapist is honestly teasing this out, but maybe it's just, we'll talk about this and maybe this will help illuminate that. So being willing really means that I am willing to go there. I'm willing to submit to the process. Trying feels more energetically like white knuckling, like, it feels more intense to me. Does it to you? Like, I'm trying. I'm doing my best. Willing is like, you know what? I'm willing to I'm going to be here with you. Willing feels less forced, less like following a certain structure, or like I have to do A to B to C to D. Do you know what I mean? It feels more like I'm willing to just see where this takes me. I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to allow this to come to fruition. It feels less active. And I don't know why, again, like I said, I don't know why your therapist is really teasing this out for you, but my guess would be, because we have complex PTSD, I wonder if she feels, and ask for clarification, right? Therapists can't just say shit and not explain it if we don't get it. It's okay to ask and be like, I don't know what you mean. I'm doing my best. I don't see the difference. Ask her. But my guess, and you could even say, I think maybe, do you mean this? I don't know. My guess is that she thinks that you are like white knuckling therapy. You're trying so hard. You're like, it's going to work. I'm going to make it happen. And like, we're so tensed. We're still putting ourselves almost in a stress response. Maybe that's because we're used to being in, like, our complex PTSD has got us queued up and we don't know how to not be queued up. Okay. So I wonder if she thinks that you're doing that and she wants you to, instead of fighting it, maybe even fighting against therapy a little bit in that fight, she wants you to kind of just be willing to go along with it, to move through the process. If she wants you to be less rigid or less, maybe there's an urge for perfectionism, she wants to be less intense about it and more willing to like go into the dark places of yourself and do that work. Again, I don't really feel like there's this huge difference between the two, but I think she means energetically speaking. But ask her about it. Because that's the only difference that I can see from a therapist perspective. And I'm so sorry Thanksgiving was traumatic. I don't know who needs to hear this, and I know this is a little bit late. It's actually very late. It was like past holidays, but you never have to see family in the holidays if it's a potentially traumatic or abusive situation. Like if people in our family are still like we have to be around our past abusers, you don't have to go. I know the guilt tripping is fucking intense, but I would much rather we either A, spend it with people we like, our chosen family, like our friends and loved ones that we pick, or B, we don't see anybody and we do things that day to help ourselves heal and feel good and like create new traditions, like maybe in our own home with our own children or even with ourselves and our animals or whatever, our partner, our roommates. We create our own thing that we do that day. Like maybe every Christmas morning now, or Christmas Eve, we make a certain kind of food and we watch a certain movie. Like even Sean and I getting together, I mean, we've been together for, 16 years, I think now. I lose track. But anyway, since 2008, whatever that is, do the math. We always have certain things that we do as a family, just the two of us, well now Roxy, every, Christmas and between Christmas and Thanksgiving, we have certain foods we like to make, and having traditions and having routines can feel kind of healing. So I encourage you to do those for yourself. Even if you live alone, make a tradition. Start something new for you. Watch a film that you really like. Maybe it's a Hallmark movie. There's no judgments. Maybe it's, my favorite is Home for the Holidays, if you need one. It's actually about Thanksgiving and it's pretty funny. But anyways, maybe create that tradition for yourself, because we don't have to go back to be told that you're too sensitive or, oh, you're always so reactive. We don't need to deal with that bullshit. That's just, it's not worth it, right? Yeah. But I hope that helps tease out the willing versus trying. But ask your therapist for clarification. Know that you can always ask them. Therapists will say things and it doesn't always make sense. And it's important that we make sure we're all on the same page. Moving on to question number 4, it says, hey, Katie, I am a very socially anxious introvert, which causes me to avoid a lot of social situations and interactions. Sometimes I feel lonely and friendless, but I am very close to my mom and my sister, which feels like enough human connection to me. But is that really enough? I have 1 or 2 close friends, but I don't talk to them as often for some reason that doesn't bother me. I simultaneously feel lonely and like I want friends, but I also don't mind either way, and I love being by myself. I think that's because you skew towards maybe more of the introverted piece, and also if we have high social anxiety or social phobia, that can make social situations more stressful. But because you do have that some kind, like you feel lonely sometimes, I think we need to reach out to those 2 other close friends a little bit more. And we need to have regular check-ins. If it's like once a month or twice a month, I think that would be my goal for you. Okay, let's keep reading though. Sorry. It seems weirdly contradictory. What are your thoughts on this? Also, I've been going for therapy for a few months, and it took me a while to be comfortable around my therapist, but I'm getting there. And I realized that my lonely, friendless feeling has mostly gone away since starting therapy. Is it bad to rely on a therapist to fill the loneliness void? Thanks for everything you do. Great question. I don't like good or bad. I would say it's not sustainable to rely on a therapist to fill that loneliness void. And what that tells me is that you actually do need different interaction, not just your mom and sister. It's great that you have that relationship, but I will say there is something to having friends that are not family. And this isn't any dog on family. Like I love my family. I'm very close to my mom. I talk to my brother all the time. I was super close to my grandma and papa before they passed away. Family is incredibly important to me. Family is different than friends. And there's just some change in the dynamic. And if you don't feel it, I don't know how to describe it to you, but everyone's going to be different. It's essentially just a different level of understanding in both areas. Like family's known me since I was born, most people. So there's this, oh, remember this, they all call me sis. So remember this, sis, and we used to do that and blah, blah, blah. And they have this like history of me. But because I moved away at 18 to go to college, my friends know adult me. Like I'll never forget, this was many years ago, but my mom had come, when we first moved to Austin, my mom had come over for the holidays, and we went over to our neighbors. They invited us over for like drinks and some appetizers. And she was like, you talk a lot. And it caught me by surprise, but I realized that my mom barely knows therapized me. I don't even know how to tell you guys this because you don't know that version of me either. But growing up, I I mean, I was still spicy and feisty the way that I am, but I was much more meek in many situations. And I wasn't super chatty because I wasn't very confident. I was also like a kid, and I'm uncomfortable in my body and who am I? I didn't know. And I had forgotten that that version of me existed. I was so insecure, so unsure of myself, and I would overcompensate by being feisty. That's where it started. Also, I am my mother's daughter, my father's daughter. They're both very feisty people, come from a long line of stubborn women. But that caught me because I was like, oh, she doesn't really know me anymore. And so it was up to me to bring our relationship kind of up to speed because I talk to her all the time, but she's not around. I never lived near her. Now I know that's a very specific to me personal experience or example of this, but I just say that to say that friendships can be different. They know a different version of us possibly. Like if you're like me and you moved away at 18 to college and never moved back, like your family may not know adult you. And so it's really important for us to have these differing relationships, these differing people in our lives. And clearly it's something that you needed, which is why seeing a therapist felt good. It shows that that need is there. So my encouragement for you is don't judge yourself of having that therapist fill the void, but I do challenge you to reach out to those friends anyways and start making regular check-ins and get-togethers with them to help assuage that need. Because it's okay. We all need people, and family's just a little bit different. It doesn't mean that they can't serve their own purpose and those relationships aren't valuable. They definitely are. But we also clearly need a different type of relationship too. And so we want to make space for all of that so that you feel fulfilled and you don't feel like you're on your own. We don't want to feel lonely. And I know this time of year can be lonely for a lot of us. Reach out. Let's connect. It's a good time to connect too. People have time off of work. I know it can be a little hectic, but especially between Christmas and New Year's, good time to maybe have someone over or bring some cookies over and catch up with them or whatever. Get together with those friends, okay? Final question number 5 says, hey, Katie, how do I stop being mad at my therapist for telling me she cares about me? Interesting. Every time she tells me that she's been worried or that she cares about me, I get this voice in my head screaming at me that it's fake and that this relationship is not a real one. I feel like she says this stuff only because it's appropriate and to make me feel like she cares so that her words have more impact on me. Interesting how quickly we jump to manipulation. I wonder if we have a history of that. I wonder if somebody else in our life has done that to us. Like she's acting for the purpose of doing her job well, even if it means lying. And after therapy sessions, I often feel completely alone and lied to because it's her job to make me feel like I matter. So her words are only from that goal and not from her heart. Wow, interesting. And I do think that she might care. Oh, look at this. We might, but not in the way that people usually care for each other. For her, caring is a choice and has nothing to do with me as an individual. So how can I feel like she cares about me when she would say and care the same way for anyone else she met, even if that person is a bad person? That's not what caring means to me. So it's not that I would want her to care more. It's just that I don't want her to lie to me. So interesting where we've gone with this. And I don't like the statement that they care because they're obviously not in it for the money. My argument is more that if she can care the same way about anyone, then it doesn't mean anything. Okay, we have a couple of things to unpack here. Number one, I have some journaling homework for you because I'm going to be honest. I'm going to come out hot and heavy here at the beginning. This has nothing to do with your therapist. 0%. I know it feels like it's all about her. 0%. For you, you need to figure out where else in your life you felt lied to and why this potential experience of I have a hypothesis that someone who was supposed to care for you harmed you. And so caring is a very loaded word. It's almost like super triggering because of our past experience. So I want you to consider 2 pieces. Number 1, has anybody who was ever supposed to care for you hurt you? And what was that like? And when did that happen? Number 2, has anyone ever lied to you and then you got hurt as a result? And why is lying so triggering? I want you to kind of dig into this, the why behind. Why is care such a loaded term? And why is lying so fucking triggering? No one likes to be lied to, by the way. But for you, we're having this overreaction. Remember, overreactions are not judgmental terms. It just shows us that the reaction to what your therapist said is greater than the situation itself warrants. And that tells us there's something there. So we need to dig into that a little bit more to understand why someone saying they care for us is so triggering and why lying is such a loaded thing. Again, nobody likes to be lied to, but for you, it's a very big response. We're having this huge reaction. So there's that. Then I also am very curious about how you would define caring. When someone says they care for you, what does that mean? And is that definition difficult for you to come up with? Or do we have specific examples? It might be easy or hard. I don't know. But I'd like you to figure out what it means for someone to say, I care about you. Like if I told you, hey, I care about you, what does that mean? And if I care for you, does that mean that I can't care for other people? And if someone is quote unquote a bad person, but I still care for them, does that mean that my care for you is less? Why do we think that? Where does that definition or belief come from, right? The work that I want you to do is all in that, in the understanding of your emotional reaction to this. And you could tell your therapist this. There's nothing wrong with this. This is really helpful information. I'm very interested. I have a lot of questions, as you can see, because this tells us that something else has gone on. Something's happened. This is helpful information to tell us like why we're having this reaction, right? Our overreactions or our explosiveness or our emotional responses to life aren't bad things. I know they can cause other things to happen that can be bad, but in and of themselves, they're helpful information. It's telling our system and us that something has happened that we haven't processed. Something is going on with us, or we have a belief system that's making this really painful or really difficult or etc. And so we have to figure out where and why, because your therapist accidentally walked into a huge minefield of triggers for you. And it's important for you to understand where that's coming from and to tell your therapist about it, because I think this is going to potentially be the crux of your work together. And I think it'll be the biggest bit of growth that you feel as a person. And I don't know what we'll find out about it. There's a ton, I could take you down a whole rabbit hole of questions that I would have, but I feel like I've already given you enough to work with. Let's figure out why this is so triggering, because it actually has zero to do with your therapist. And I know that's really hard for you to believe, but just trust me as you dig into this. I think you'll be surprised, but maybe not too surprised about what you find. Okay? Thank you all so much for listening and watching. Thank you for sharing this podcast. It truly does help. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Do your homework, and I'll see you next time. Hey, honey. All finished.